Ohio State survives Nebraska 21-17 at the shoe. And as much as this is a win for Ohio State and they continue their pursuit of playing in the Big Ten championship game, this was not by any stretch of the imagination a great game by the Ohio State Buckeyes, particularly defensively. Offensively. We're talking about a team that really couldn't punch it in as quickly as we thought they could until the end of the game when Nebraska had a 17-14 lead. First time they had a lead here, and then the Nebraska defense just could not hold up against what was the best series by Ohio State that I've seen in quite some time, right? Moving the football down the field like you're supposed to, taking advantage of Will Howard in the QB run game, but Quinshon Judkins also going, okay, well, you need a bucket, I'm going to go get you a bucket. Emeka Egbuka going, you need a bucket, I'm going to go get you a bucket. Carnell Tate going, you need a bucket, I'm going to go get you a bucket. And this, I think, has more to do with the offensive line than it does anything else. And I think most Buckeye fans would tell you that, right? You know that you lost Josh Simmons for the duration, right? Mikowski just is getting beat up over there on left tackle. It wasn't great. And then he goes down. So now you got to slide Donovan Jackson out to left tackle. And you got to put Luke Montgomery in. And now you got three guards, basically, on one side of the line of scrimmage. I mean, Seth McLaughlin's obviously not a guard, but you get my point there, right? There's a reason why we call them tackles. There's a reason why we call them guards. There's a reason why tackles go first, second, third, fourth in the first round and why guards got to be really, really special to do it. You also got to take into this that toward the end, it was nasty. It was a rough game to watch. It's the kind of game that Nebraska felt like they could win, honestly. And as much as I was on Nebraska's head, and I challenged them, I did. You go take a look at these segments that we did earlier in the week. And I was saying, hey, man, y'all need to go find out who it is you're playing for. You need to go find out what your why is. Go to the Quickie Mart, go to the plant, go to talk to somebody who lives, breathes, eats Nebraska football, and has for the better part of their entire lives. And then you'll have something to walk into the shoe with, because it won't just be you and your brothers. It'll be you plus the 5 million of those folks that call themselves Nebraska fans. I realize that I'm exaggerating with the 5 million there, but you get my point. Point there is mostly, hey, man, you got to go in there and understand that you're not just playing for this season or last season or even the next season. You're playing for decades of history here that is central to a lot of people's standard of living and a lot of people's psyche. And you know what? They answered the bell. They showed up, right? Did it end the way that we thought it was going to end? Yeah. But was it in doubt? Also, yeah, because Ohio State was looking like taking their first loss in the Ryan Day era against an unranked opponent ever, right? All of the losses that Ryan Day has sustained up until now and continuing now are to top 12 opponents or better. And this would have gone down as one of the worst losses for Ohio State in recent history because they are expected to play in the national championship this year. They've spent $20 million on the roster. They retooled the coaching staff. Ryan Day handed the play calling privileges to Chip Kelly. You already have the loss by 1 point to the number one team in the country on the road. You can't afford a loss to a 5-2 Nebraska at home, and they didn't. For Nebraska, though, you get UCLA next week. You're at 5-3 like you were last year. You still got 4 opportunities to get to bowl eligibility. But for Ohio State, this is survive in advance. Now you get Penn State, who I expect to be undefeated when they play Ohio State at Beaver Stadium next week, but they got to get past what I think is also a really difficult challenge in Wisconsin. We got to talk about Denzel Burke, man. That's a guy who came back, who said he got a first-round draft grade because he wanted to get his gold pants. It means he wants to be Michigan. He wanted to win a Big Ten championship. Hadn't done that. And he wanted to win a national championship. He hadn't done that. And the last 2 outings for him have been him getting cooked. Evan Stewart going after him. Tez Johnson going after him. Isaiah Nair, who hadn't been able to do much of anything against anybody, also, making it hard for him. And then Thomas Fidone, I think we need to talk more about him as a tight end prospect. He's, for me, the kind of tight end that Colston Loveland turned out to be at Michigan last year. I think he has opportunity to be really great. He had 4 catches, 55 yards. Pretty decent game from Dylan Raiola. At one point, I saw him run 37 yards through the middle of Ohio State and through the middle of an Ohio State defense without an armed escort, and I had to ask myself, how does something like that happen? That said, 3 sacks of him. The Cody Simon series at the end was really cool to watch. It kind of got little bit rough and tumble there toward the end, but, the Ohio State offense basically put them in that position going 1 of 10 on third down. 1 of 10 on third down. The Ohio State defense held Nebraska to 5 of 16. Just 285 total yards for Ohio State to 273 for Nebraska, and just 64 rush yards for an Ohio State team that Eddie George was talking about had been committed to the run, right? You also get what I think is the silver lining here of Jeremiah Smith continuing to be Jeremiah Smith. He ties Cris Carter's freshman record for receiving touchdowns with 8. He seems assured of passing the receiving yards mark at some point. He's got 618. I believe that Cris Carter had 648, and I think we're talking about 38 catches so far for Jeremiah Smith, and the record's something like 41. I think he's just going to get there. I really want to know how you're going to fix this offensive line, because now you're down to what looks like a third-string player at that left tackle position, because you're having to slide dudes out that are All-American starters at guard. I don't know how you fix injuries, right? That's really been an issue for a lot of teams, not the least of which is Ohio State. A guy like Josh Simmons is important because the offensive line just had a hard time last year getting any push, trying to run the football. And if you don't have any sort of continuity on that offensive line, you're probably not going to be in a good space to try to contend for championships, because that's really one of those deciding factors. How many times have these guys played together? How good is this unit? Is this unit good enough to be a Joe Moore award-winning unit, even a finalist? We don't really know. We won't really get a chance to answer that. But I got to tell you, seeing 10 rushes for 29 yards from Quinshon Judkins, and seeing 10 rushes for 25 yards from Travion Henderson, and then hearing a great analyst in Joel Klatt say, hey, look, I don't think this has anything to do with Quinshon Judkins' vision or Travion Henderson's vision. It has everything to do with the offensive line and whether or not they can get you some run lanes. And there were a couple of times that I got to say, Travion Henderson looked moments away from breaking one open if somebody doesn't catch him by an ankle. Same thing is true of Quinshon Judkins. I think finally got to see Carnell Tate that I thought we would see for the last couple of years. He is one of the most versatile wide receivers in that room. He can play all those positions, and it was nice to see him take the top off the defense a couple times. But again, Jeremiah Smith, 3 catches, 70 yards, 1 for 60. Good grief, man, and the TD. Of course, Quinshon Judkins had the go-ahead winning TD. And Will Howard, who has been a GOAT in many of these games, made some plays that I think were winning ones and showed his maturity and why you have a guy who is a grad transfer at quarterback making those plays for you. Again, there's just a lot to clean up here, man. I was thinking to myself, Ohio State was choosing to play their Oregon September right now, and that's just not great. Like, going into the game against Ohio State, Oregon looked like it was trending in the right direction, finally found its form. But against opponents like Boise State, right, or Idaho, they had their Nebraska game. Now Ohio State seems to be having its Nebraska game, but it's still got the loss to Oregon, and Oregon's got the win against Ohio State. If anything, I think that we're not going to see Ohio State move up above Penn State in the rankings without a win against them next week. But that's also the big game on the schedule coming up, man. You got to do something against Nebraska just to get to Penn State. And then I feel like we're going to get the measure of both Penn State and Ohio State once again in a game that I expect to be really, really outstanding. You got two of the 3 best tailback combinations in the sport in that game, and Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, Quinshon Judkins, and Travion Henderson. But right now, the offensive line at Penn State is healthy, and the offensive line at Ohio State is not. And both of these defenses are capable of stomping you out. But that Jim Knowles defense has looked gettable in the last couple of weeks. Big reason as to why is Denzel Burke. Remember, Jordan Hancock came up with the interception to end this game. But you got to figure out what it is that your best cover corner has not been able to do and why he's getting thrown like sauce in a pan and cooked